Okay, this is The Grass is Greener on WXRW 104.1 FM in Milwaukee. I am the host of the program, Gary Grass. Oh, with me is my co-host, Babette Gruneau. I almost forgot about her.
Oh, thanks. I'm having a bit of a hard time talking
she's sick.
today.
She's
I'm
sick, so I have a code.
Yeah. So Gary's going to do most of the talking with our guest, who hopefully will show up soon.
Oh, he was just showed up.
He just showed up.
Yeah,
hey.
I was kind of lingering on the music there because he had not quite appeared at the Zoom room at that moment, but he is here now.
Okay, well, let's welcome in Professor Jeffrey Sommers from UWM.
Well, greetings, Gary and Babette. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Yes.
Okay, yes. All right. And I can actually, this is radio, of course, so no one else can see you, but I can see you. That's nice. And we don't always do it with the video on because it's like, it's radio.
Well,
but
people don't always appreciate seeing me.
well, I do.
Likewise.
Okay, so, and we're adjusting your levels here because that's what happens when you show up after we've started broadcasting. So we wanted to talk, I think, today about the two-party system in the United States and some of the efforts of the donkey party and some of the maybe structural limitations thereon. Is that we had an email from you, and I'm just interpreting kind of the general universe of your topic.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things, of course, that the country is very concerned about, quite legitimately, is the state of healthcare and its connection to just costs generally. Mm-hmm. So this is something which, in part, led to the loss of the presidential election by Kamala Harris. There were a lot of reasons for it. But one was the fact that Democrats were tone deaf to this issue of increasing costs and dropping standards of living. And this is, of course, something that the working class has endured under neoliberalism for decades now. It just seems like we're in another period of acceleration in terms of declining living standards, or stagnant living standards, at least. So that is more or less what I was referencing.
Okay. I mean, it sounded like there's a description of how basically the ACA, the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, was something that was sort of designed within the limitations of the Democratic Party to say, look, here's what we're gonna do, right? We have a bunch of wealthy donors that we don't want to discomfort by charging them any more money. So our basic task here is not to redirect wealth so much as to find little things that we can do, maybe sometimes big things, that will not injure our donors, not take a lot of money away from the rich, but will find smart things to do that we can fit, that we can get something for everybody in this. And if we pay a big bribe to the insurance companies, then it won't cost rich people anything to give health care to the poor, because what we're going to do is we're just going to arrange this so that we have this. We're paying off the insurance companies to do it. They get their little bribe, their little cut. Everyone gets insured, and then the Republicans will obviously come and attack this program for the next 50 years, and the insurance companies will be beholden to the Democrats to keep their things. So we have a huge funding base for the Democratic Party, and they'll keep on giving us money year every time we want to run for election. And so the Democratic Party will do great out of this, and we've made our donors happy, and at least for a short while we get a lot of people health care, and then we'll see how that goes over time. But at least in the short run, it's great for the Democrats.
Well, that's exactly right, Gary Babette. I think instead of just giving them a cut, though, we've been waterboarding them with money, and they are just being forced.
For them, that's torture.
Yeah, exactly. It's a form of torture. It's a form of torture that we have to endure at their expense, I guess, right, of becoming fantastically rich. But you articulated, I think, the problem very nicely, in that this is the thread, the needle, in fact, that the Democrats have tried to thread over the past several decades with neoliberalism, and that is how can we maintain our working class former base, because now it's a base that's comprised of university educated professionals and people in the financial, insurance, real estate, uh, tech, and some other sectors as well. How can we maintain them and the working class? So we have to continue to find ways of cutting the working class some kind of a break. And so, just as you were saying, the Democrats wanted the best of all worlds from their perspective, which is to increase the number of people who had health insurance. Prior to the passage of the Affordable Care Act, which has been none too affordable if you take a look at total costs. In fact, it remains the world's most expensive system. And we can, break down just how expensive that is later if you wish. But we thought that we could increase the number of people who are covered. And in fact, on that one metric, it's been quite successful. Prior to the ACA's implementation in 2011, it was quite common to find people who were uninsured, and we had something like 50 million people who were uninsured. Now, we've reduced that number by some 22 million people with the Affordable Care Act, with its insurance mandate. And so
Mhm.
we have something like today 92% of the population that is covered by some form of health insurance. Now, on one level, that's a great success. On another level, the coverage can be expensive and spotty, depending on what you have. So for many people, you can still go bankrupt while being formally covered by health
Right,
insurance. So
right.
it's been a
Right.
system which was
It
really
isn't like some
uh,
European countries where everyone is covered. And I
yeah,
know
yeah.
that even
And we're
there,
and again
there's
Well,
we made
yeah,
great
yeah.
strides to getting closer to full coverage, but again with a system that is simultaneously both dramatically more expensive and leaves people with, again,
Well, it leaves
scanty
people that,
coverage.
yeah, people who get coverage still feel like maybe the solution to their problems is to shoot a healthcare CEO, and
oh dear.
and the Democrats have yet to propose anything better.
Yeah, the Democrats have not. And we have to remember that, and we should not be blaming just the GOP for this. But the Democrats thought that instead of seizing this political momentum that existed in the winter and spring and early summer of 2009 when Barack Obama first came into office. And frankly, the Republicans were terrified of him. I recall watching Fox News at this time and seeing people like Sean Hannity and others who were just in a panic because they thought that he could run the table. He was absolutely golden from the perspective of the public, and they just didn't know what to do. So he had control of the House and the Senate, and there was some possibility that we could have had a Medicare for all type of system. But instead, Barack Obama wanted to be the great consensus builder, conciliator, and he gave the Republicans essentially their own plan, except with some improvements. And that plan was first advanced by Bob Dole in his GOP 1996 run against Bill Clinton. That's when
Hmm.
he began talking about an insurance mandate. So if we could just get everyone buying insurance, it would lower the costs on average for all.
Hmm.
Newt Gingrich and then the Heritage
Spread the
Foundation picked
pool is
up
the
as
purpose of insurance. Makes sense.
yeah, exactly. They refined it further. Mitt Romney actually implements it when he
Hmm.
is governor in Massachusetts. The result was very high levels of coverage, also the most expensive on a per capita basis health system in the entire United States. And then Barack Obama and the Democrats added a few refinements, yeah, good ones, in terms of, no pre-existing
Right.
conditions.
Make the
We
coverage
have,
really much more portable.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's like, they, I mean, they did there's did a lot of little things. I mean, it looks like it looks like kind of this weird chimerical beast because it's putting together all the different parts of the pre-existing healthcare system and say, well, what if we expand this a little bit and expand this part a little bit?
Hmm.
We'll expand employer coverage, we'll expand state coverage, we'll expand this. We'll leave. Well, maybe we'll leave a couple holes. We'll expect the states to maybe it's easier for the states to fill the holes, and it's kind of jury rigged from what we have. It's not throw everything out and start over. It's not take one piece and expand it to cover all the others. It's just sort of like, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then tweaking this and that. And
Exactly. A lot of duct tape and baling wire.
uh,
And in effect, it's very difficult, admittedly, to develop a new airplane when
while
you're
it's in
already
flight,
flying in
yes,
another one,
yeah, yeah.
and to switch over. So, I mean, it would be absolute bedlam, mayhem, and chaos to move from one system to another while you're having to try and figure out how to manage that transition while metaphorically in flight. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done, but let's not pretend that it would not be incredibly challenging. You would, in effect, have to euthanize a massive industry, that being the insurance industry,
Hmm.
health insurance industry, and
Yeah, they wouldn't
you
be
would be
too
getting
fond
rid
of
of.
that.
Oh yeah, I'm all for that as well. I mean, I can go all Jacobin on that score. I hear you.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but
there's
they
what.
would have some real problems with it. I mean, they'd put up a fight.
Yes. So, it would
Yeah,
not be very easy, and they would organize against you, and then you would have
you'd lose on all
really,
the benefits of going through a private insurance system like that. I mean,
yeah.
all the things that
But
insurance companies do for you that we can't do through the state.
Like
yeah.
what?
So yeah, exactly. I mean, your sarcasm is well noted and taken, but you would have millions of people who would be thrown out of work.
Hmm.
And many of them are paid very nicely. These
Yep.
are, often middle class, upper middle class jobs. And once we get into upper administration in the health insurance industry, well, then you're looking at seven-figure incomes and compensation packages, which sometimes even are higher than that.
Hmm.
And that's whether you're in the private or even the non a profit health insurance sector. So because they have to compete with one another in a sense for talent. So even the non-profit health insurance sector pays millions of dollars to its uh, top executives. So you would all of a sudden have those people who would be very angry at you. You would lose them in the next election. You would probably lose the next election. And Americans, well, let's just say that they aren't always the most self-reflective. And anytime something went wrong, they would reflexively blame the
Yeah.
government rather
Yeah,
than.
I mean,
It would just
no one
be,
ever went broke underestimating the American people.
yes, yes, yes. So it would be a challenge to say the least. Now, the Republicans in this deal, though, got exactly what they wanted. On one level, they got a private insurance system, which has not been dismantled, although they don't like the subsidies, that part they don't like.
Mhm.
Although they were, willing to actually offer some themselves in their various permutations of this insurance mandate model. And now they've got everyone mad as hell at the government. So they have focused their attention and people's frustrations with the system on the government. It's labeled both
Mm.
Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. So on the one hand, you can blame that nasty Mr. Obama, and you can also blame some duplicity on their part in suggestions or hints that this model would be affordable. Now, actually, if you take a look at the rate of growth in cost of healthcare, the really, really big spike was between about 1999 and 2005. Then it went down in terms of not net down, but the rate of increase
Right,
slowed a
right,
bit
right. Yeah.
between about 2006 and 2011. And then that pretty much
American
stayed
American people
in,
aren't very good at separating like first derivative from second derivative from zero
right,
derivative. So
right. And so, the long and the short of it is that a slowdown
Betsy's
in the
looking at me
rate of
confusedly.
increase continued through about 2016. And so, I mean, what we can say is that if we compare the decade since the implementation of the ACA and the decade preceding it, it was actually marginally better under the ACA. I don't think for any reasons having to do with the ACA, but the rate of increase didn't get worse. But hell, people aren't going to look at that. All they're going to look at is how much am I paying out of pocket? Has it gone up? Hell yes, it's gone up. So they just point the finger
Right.
at
Right. It was
the
going up
ACA.
before. It's going up now. It keeps going up and up and up, and that hasn't been
Yeah. Well,
directly.
the way the GOP has framed this is they are actually saying that the rate of increase actually went up at an accelerating rate under the ACA, and that's just false. It just continued roughly at the rate that it was at, with some ups and downs. But if we take a longer view of the past 20 years,
Yeah.
roughly around the same
Yeah.
rate.
Well, they're the
But
same
anyway,
people say there's been no global warming in the last 19 years.
yeah. Right. So it's the same kind of reasoning, and people are quite susceptible to it. So they're latching on to that, and they're probably going to get some kind of unraveling of this model. That said, this is a model that does need to be dismantled, but it needs to be done so in a way that is very, very careful and in a way that doesn't leave people uninsured. So the current battle right now in terms of the government shutdown is an important one. We don't want to see 20 million people with their health insurance premiums doubling as a consequence of allowing the COVID extensions on healthcare coverage to sunset and then losing another 15 million people in terms of being insured altogether. That's what could happen under GOP proposals.
That's
So
quite
we
a
need to
while.
figure out, yeah, it's pretty bad. So we need to figure out a way of both keeping people insured in the short term while dismantling this system that is a skeleton larded up with massive fat, but just massive rent seeking. So we have these big hospital complexes now where you have people playing classical piano in the lobbies, and there's gold chandeliers, and the executives are being paid in the millions. I mean, really, it's become obscene how
That
much money
sounds
has gone
ridiculous.
into.
Well,
Yeah.
I've seen the pianos.
Yes,
You know,
it's really striking. And then we have systems which were designed, for instance, to subsidize poor and working people in terms of health costs. Good, okay, right there. So, for instance, with drug pricing, we turned a lot of this over to this firm called Apex. And what Apex did was it charged some people of more means a lot more money for drugs so that drugs could be delivered to other people with less means at less cost. Well, instead, what has happened is that Apex figured out that in their model, their profits were linked to, in terms of its incentive structure, to prescriptions. They were getting a cut of every prescription. So they were just encouraging hospitals, and hospitals were encouraging doctors, write those bloody prescriptions, go at it, because we make a cut of that. So it's really driven up costs. There are endless examples of this. Just to give you one more, in the state of Ohio, for a while they had a contract with CVS and one other big pharmacy chain to supply, you know, all reimbursable ACA prescriptions. And they just figured out ways of just massively packing extra costs onto that. And then this was supposed to be administratively cheaper to do it that way. And administratively, it actually was. But nonetheless, when they reverted to a model, broke those contracts and reverted to a model which just said, get your prescriptions wherever you want, even though the administrative costs in that instance did go up significantly, overall, the price of prescription drugs went way, way down because of the loss of monopoly power.
I
That said, and this is where it gets, wonky and complicated. But the thing that our system doesn't do enough of is to have monopoly power and bargaining power that comes with that. So you've heard Bernie Sanders and others
right,
talk about
right.
this. And that's what we lack. You look at a system like Japan or Italy, France, these are some of the really high quality yet really low price providers. And what they do is they just have the government set the bloody price for everything. And so we have a system in which we have uh, a not a monopoly, but we have very few players in the system with very little transparency in terms of what they're charging for things. And so the prices are just going up all the time for everything. But if we just could set standard rates like some of these other countries do and just say, that's it, fellas and ladies, that's what you're getting.
Well, I mean,
We could,
yeah. I mean, the pricing is always crazy, right?
mhm.
The hospitals have their secret book of what they charge for everything, and it's one
Yep.
thing if you're insured and one thing if you're not, and it's like, why is it $6 for a tongue depressor and 95 cents for a disposable plastic glove that costs five, and and the,
That's all important and small change stuff, but we also need pricing for, okay, what is a triple bypass going to cost? I
Hmm.
mean, we need to have standard prices for these procedures, and then we can deliver them at far more affordable prices. Now, will there be losers?
well,
Yes, of course.
yeah,
I mean, the insurance
Well,
companies, all
yeah.
the
there's
rest, but also
if they aren't
some,
getting paid what they want, will they say, well, you don't really need that?
There's a market.
right.
There's a market. They'll they're willing to do the work for less money than they're getting paid for it because they're getting paid a lot more money than they get paid in most places. I mean, it's
Right. Well, that's the thing is that once you have a monopoly system, it really cuts off the exits. So one of the reasons why we have a lot of doctors, for instance, that say, I don't think I'm going to work with Medicaid. So Medicaid does this. They set, certain prices for all sorts of things. And it's a very efficient system, very low administrative overhead, runs at a very, very low cost. But it does have some limits because doctors say, I can go elsewhere where I'm going to get more money. But if you have a monopoly system in place, then the number of exits are very few. In effect, the number
mhm.
of exits is limited to those people who are rich enough, and there's a lot of these rich people, but not hugely so, to pay out of pocket for whatever it is that they want. So, you would have over 90% of doctors being forced into the national system, and they might not live as well as they did, especially if they were specialists, although we would
Yeah.
probably end up
Well,
paying
yeah. I mean,
general
yeah.
practitioners more. They're underpaid in our system. But specialists, yeah,
Yeah.
they probably would not make as much as they otherwise might.
One thing
Uh,
that Dean Baker points out is that we have artificial scarcity of doctors too. We put
yeah.
unnecessary limits on foreign doctors coming over to practice in order to
Hmm.
keep the privilege of practicing rare, and because it's supply and demand, and that drives up the price, which is great for doctors but bad for patients and
Absolutely.
bad for the government that's paying for the health care.
Yeah. And we also have this problem of superstar doctors. So for instance, there's a professor of cardiology at the University of Miami whose salary is $4 million a year.
Wow.
Uh, on one level, you have to remain competitive, but this is one of those externalized costs of
He's
our
at a
just general
university.
high level of inequality, is
He's,
that we've created a model in which if you want competence, you have to
wait,
pay.
he's at a university hospital.
Yeah,
He must be
yeah,
the second highest paid university employee after the football coach.
yeah, right, exactly, probably. So you have this model in which, to find people who are competent, you have to pay this top tier, really, really, really high levels. And it didn't used to be that way. We're all of us are old enough to remember when it didn't used to be this way. Uh, but we have to somehow unravel this because it's making the system just far too costly. So,
Yeah,
in terms of cost,
okay,
let's think about just what
yeah,
it does
you,
cost in terms of. Go ahead.
no, no. I was gonna say you continue, and I've got a point when you're finished with this.
Yeah, well, just in terms of, and these are some numbers that I'm sure you're familiar with, but if we just take a look at what the percent of GDP that we spend, the percent of our total economy on health in the United States, we are just this outlier, way off the charts. We're currently at about 18.5% of our entire economy. That's massive to pay for this. Canada, it's about 11%. Many parts of Western Europe also in that range. You get into places like Japan, it's well down into the single digits. And these are all places that have far better health outcomes than ours. And also because it's being paid by the public purse, they have much better public health. So there's a connection that is established in the minds of policymakers, which then gets implemented as policy, having more recreation opportunities for people so they can
Hmm.
be fitter, thinking more about the food supply,
Well, yeah, yeah.
understanding that it's regulated a
I
bit.
was thinking,
Yeah.
two factors that bear on paying more and getting less, right? One of them
Yep.
is a definite lack of focus on public health and preventative care, right?
Oh, yes. Right.
We're a system that likes to have lots of sick people so we can treat them, right? It's like we do not we treat disease, we don't prevent disease, right? So this is I forget exactly what phrase was used to describe that I heard recently that it was really clever, but it's like that's one thing because it's much more expensive to do it that way. And when people were talking about when they were first passing the ACA, they'd say, well, look, we have so many people that fall out all the way down to the emergency care system, which is the most expensive of it all. But we
Right.
haven't moved people to the least expensive system, which is keeping them from getting sick, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting. I spend a lot of time in Romania these days. I used to spend a lot of time in Latvia, but these days it's more in Romania. And it's really striking how they've created a public culture of activity
Fitness?
and exercise.
Yeah.
Every evening you see people out. I mean, they're not doing like the crazy kind of all out workouts. Americans tend to do things in extremes, but I mean, they're just out for nice long walks in very
Mm-hmm.
pleasant parks,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just always in motion, and so they're healthier, less stress, and it really is reflected in some of their health outcomes. I guess because time is probably getting short in this interview, I suspect. I do want to
Well,
just say that.
we're halfway through almost, so. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought we were doing a half an hour. Okay.
No, no.
No, oh
You've
no,
got
no,
the
no, no,
hour.
no! You have the hour, please.
Okay. All right. Well, great. So, in addition to thinking about ways of having more holistic approaches to these issues, which we were just discussing, we also need to see how this very model dysfunctional model has been reproduced in other sectors. One other sector that it has been fashioned in is higher education. So this
Hmm.
whole kind of effort by Democrats to reconcile neoliberalism, which demands that ever more surpluses, it's kind of a supply side model of economics, ever more surpluses get created and redistributed upward. And how do we figure out how to pay for that? We typically do it through extending more credit.
Uh-huh.
So ultimately, of course, that bill comes due, and then the system is under even more strain. But Democrats, rather than trying to fix the problem, usually try and figure out some credit fix to it. Well, we'll just borrow right now, and then later we can figure out how to pay. Of course, ultimately, we find ourselves then having to make more cuts because we really can't continue to pay. And Republicans, of course, are absolutely committed to the supply side model, and they are not as interested in finding ways of reconciling its contradictions. And so they're just more willing to slough off ever greater parts of our population in terms of their access to things like health, higher education, etc. So they just, seem to think they can just keep
Right, right.
beating this
Only about
particular
eight
inroad.
percent of the population is educable anyway. So,
That is how they view it. Right, right. And we don't want to be overeducating
Representative
people. And
Gwen Moore was just sent me a letter on the how she has been. I had written her a letter on the attacks that the Republicans are doing on education, and she said that she has been fighting this, particularly on for people with disabilities and children who need more help in getting educated, and just how much is being cut this time around.
yeah, it's really a disgrace. If we take a look at K through 12, and if we take a look at our fair state and city, Wisconsin and Milwaukee, I mean, what you want to do from the perspective of the GOP is to segregate out school populations by those with special needs and those without special needs. So if you can kick over as many of the non-special needs students into the voucher school, private school system, then those parents are separated off from those parents who have kids with special needs. And then there's less support for education budgets.
Then there's
And
less support for the regular school system.
Right.
no, and that's exactly what I mean. So
Right.
you
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
from the perspective of the GOP, you want to channel as many non-special needs students into the private system and as many special needs students into the public system. And then, just create a ghetto, in effect, of public school systems that are disproportionately populated by kids with special needs, and then just to
And
start cutting
minorities.
funding. Yeah, and of course
Yeah.
minorities as
Yeah.
well, absolutely. But I mean, but the GOP doesn't have any problem with minorities going to private schools as well because they want to split that population as well politically. They want to divide, as to use our former
Yeah.
governor's Scott Walker's language. They want to divide and conquer. So
Mhm.
they have been very, very willing to split that population apart
Those
as
who are
well.
poor, those who,
Yeah,
you know, maybe don't
but
have
Yeah,
as
I mean,
much
there's
yeah,
there's all
yeah,
sorts of problems with
educational
that system. I mean,
backgrounds.
some of these private schools are scams, and since they're
oh
not,
yeah,
the
definitely,
people just, they get news reports about some guy that, like, got seven cars and they can't find him anymore because the school closed down because they didn't provide anything, right? And it's like all the
right,
kids that were there now have to go back to the public school and start over, having lost a grade or two, right?
right,
And it's devastating for them because they're set back permanently, right?
right.
Or I don't want to say
And
permanently,
as
but
we
it's
know,
it's a big hit for them.
right. And the bet going back to your point, I mean, this is where the GOP frankly doesn't care if the minority kids are going to public or private schools. It's the whole point though is to drive the budgets down, what we're spending on education. So if they can put them in some private schools that are underperforming, fantastic. And who cares if you discover, just as Gary was saying, a couple of years later that they didn't learn anything. I mean, you don't have standards, you don't
That
have
that may
That's the
uniform.
that may
thing.
actually be an advantage for Republican candidates.
I
So
mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. The whole thing of who cares. I mean, just appalling.
Oh, it is. It's cynical, it's appalling, and it's dangerous. And just thinking about this from a perspective of civics and the future of our country, it doesn't bode well for a future at all, frankly. Uh, and I have to say that in the sector of this that I deal with personally, which is higher education,
hmm
it's just absolutely devastating as well. I mean, we have seen this 40-year long war on higher education. It's accelerated, of course, under Trump, but we saw a national model, which was comprised of state public universities. They still, of course, exist. But, a half century ago, the public sector picked up nearly all the cost for these. And so that
oh
meant
yeah, I
you
mean, you
could,
see these graphs of just what the UW used to receive compared to now, and the state funding just has just gone
yeah.
over a
And
long period of time, not just
right. Yeah. So you in effect, you went in, say, 1970 for pretty much just about free.
Yes.
And then, today, of course, you have to go into some significant debt. And the whole model was kept going quite nicely from the perspective of the Democrats during the, say, 1990s and up until maybe the 2008 crisis, financial shock, by just, oh, well, students can take more loans. We'll increase tuition.
right,
We
right.
can continue to cut public expenditures for higher education, and the students can pick up more of it. So
I
in
remember
effect,
talking to Russ Feingold like 30 years ago, right?
yep.
And him saying, "Oh gosh, when I went to school, it was 80% grants, 20% loans, and it was like
Mm,
super cheap, and no one, it's like it wasn't something you had to like super budget for because it's like, of course you're gonna go, and it's like it's practically paid for, right?
yeah,
Um,
I mean it was it's a kind of an anecdote, but one that is quite accurate. It used to be 50 years ago. You really could, as a teenager, work in the summer at some resort up in the Northwoods
mhm.
tourist sector, and with whatever change you brought back at the end of that 3 or 4 months, you had enough money to pay for your dorm and your expenses, and your tuition was essentially free. So
Yeah.
people graduated without debt. And when they graduated without debt, that's connected to, of course, other trends that we've seen that I know you're fully aware of, such
hmm
as the average age at which people can buy their first home. There was a time when that was in your late 20s, and then it went into your early 30s. Now you're, you're ready to retire by the time you can buy and who can actually retire. Let's just say your retirement age, but you don't get to
Hmm.
retire before you can actually buy your first home. So all of that is a consequence of people being just saddled with massive debt as their total compensation
Massive debt that
has
they can't escape.
stagnated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their costs have gone up. So this is something that
Yeah.
it's a model that Democrats more or less went along with
Yeah.
because if they opposed them, well, what they have done, they would have had to have said to some very powerful
Yeah.
people, no, we need to keep your tax rates higher than they
Yeah.
are. I mean, let's just even take a look at the state of Wisconsin. Our top marginal income tax rate back in the glory days of free education, practically free education, was 11 point some odd percent. That's where it is in Minnesota, by the way, still. But eventually under Tommy Thompson and then later, we were able to bring that down to, I think it's like something like 7.75%. So that came with a real cost. That real cost was higher tuition, bigger student debt,
Closing of
and people,
schools.
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Right.
that was the cost of this model. And
So yeah.
and in fact, they knew this. I mean, it wasn't as if there weren't people that were telling them. There were even people like me who were, but nonetheless, they didn't want to listen. And they could have fought it. They could have said, look, this is what's going to happen if you do this. And instead of choosing to fight it, they took the easy way out. Yes, we can both be the candy man to big capital and make sure that we continue to allow a channel for people to access higher education through higher costs. But ultimately, contradictions built up as we predicted they would, and now here we are. And if I can just say one more thing on this point, the result has been doubly bad for working class students, as the University of Wisconsin system used to be more flat. Now, of course, the shining star was always Madison, but all of the other campuses were not all that far removed in terms of the quality of education that they provided. So the standard for hiring faculty and the rest of the UW system was always very high. Now, it may be that once they got those positions at a place like Stout or wherever, they were expected to become fully teaching faculty, but they came in really buff as really serious intellectuals and thinkers. And we still get good people, but the funding cuts disproportionately have gone to the rest of the UW system, the non-Madison part of the system. And so the tuition, as you may know, it's only marginally lower
Hmm.
at these non-Madison schools. So we have working class kids paying nearly as much tuition as it costs to go to Madison, but frankly getting an inferior product now, where there was a time where it really wasn't that much lower in terms of quality, but now it
Yeah.
really is.
I mean, one thing should address is reasons why the costs go up in all these areas. Because I mean, it's it's, I don't want to say, oh, it's complicated, but I mean, it is a little complicated. I mean, one of the
Sure.
things that was sort of an issue was, I remember kind of encountering this idea for the first time again 30 years ago when we were lobbying in Washington, like for more student financial aid, and it's like someone pointed out, which is correct, that well, the more financial aid is supplied to students, the more the universities can afford to charge because it's based on your needs. So the more needs you have, the more you get. So if they raise the tuition, you have more need, and they just suck more money out of the federal government that way. And so there's this sort of natural siphon that's created by having this, system where it's not like it's negotiated before where they give you a flat rate that say university is worth this much for you. Here it is, right?
Hmm.
They set the tuition and the government will guarantee that loan for however much, and and they'll
Yeah.
and they'll
And
protect it from bankruptcy and so forth. And so
sure.
there's this, I mean, it's not the full story, but it's one of the things that's sort of like the way they implemented it, was sort of almost designed to push up prices.
That is certainly part of the story, not the whole story, and let's talk about that a bit.
Hmm.
Especially at the flagship campuses, your Madisons, your Ann Arbors, your Champaign-Urbanas, etc. In those institutions, their costs went up significantly. As under neoliberalism, you had to compete with the best private schools, and that meant increasingly creating an almost country club-like environment for students, because students were not coming in with an expectation that they would just be getting a high-quality education, but that they would be having an experience. You were selling an experience, and you were selling an experience that was preparing people increasingly for entering or continuing, if you were already in this class, this the socioeconomic class of people who were doing better and better and better as we had this upward distribution of wealth. So, dorms became quite posh. They no longer were made out of just cinder block rooms and four people to a room and all the rest. You can still find a few of those dorms, by the way, in some parts of the country. I mean, so for instance, like at the University of Nebraska and a few places that they, at the heart of the country, they still kind of maintain that very Spartan kind of environment, even at their flagship university, but not so
How many
much.
Supreme Court justices have we had come from the University of Nebraska? You know.
Yeah, right. So, that is certainly a part of it. So you were talking about how you're getting money that's in effect guaranteed by the state, and so why would you want to reduce costs? The way that the university was structured, though, it also saw this inequality in other areas. So not just in terms of providing this kind of posh upscale experience, but also in terms of faculty. So it used to be that faculty salaries were a little bit more flat across different areas.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so sure, business professors, law professors, medical professors made more than people in the humanities and social sciences, but not massively so. And today it's massively so. And the humanities and the social sciences began to rely more on adjunct instructors, lecturers, and that meant that you had to hire more administrators to manage this increasing army of temporary faculty. And so this all contributed to an increase in cost. But I would be terribly remiss if I just left things there. There is a concept in economics that is not complicated at all called the Baumol effect. There was an economist whose surname was Baumol, who in the 1960s kind of developed a principle that many intuited, but he further defined it. And in effect, what he argued, and I think very successfully, was that in certain sectors of the economy that are very labor intensive, where the nature of the work limits labor productivity increases, the development of technology and machinery to increase the amount of work that you can do, costs go up well above the rate of inflation. So what William Baumol used as his example to describe this was the four-string quartet. He
Hmm.
said, look, the level of productivity of a four-string quartet has not changed from the 18th century to the present. There's just no way of increasing productivity. And so consequently, the cost of the four-string quartet has gone up above the
Yeah.
rate of
Yeah,
inflation.
I mean,
Now, other areas of the
they
economy,
may have like slightly better training for violists or something,
right?
but they're not. They haven't replaced the entire. They haven't replaced the cellist with a robot in order to like reduce their.
That's coming soon.
They haven't
Exactly.
produced a redundancy by saying, okay, well, we can do it
But
with three
you're
instead of
getting the principle
four.
here.
We'll just have the cellist be a droid.
Right. So you're getting the principle here. So there are other parts of the economy, however, where you can introduce some new machine. Take a look at a unpleasant part of our country's history, the early 19th century, when the cotton gin was developed, which took a job that was previously very labor intensive. One slave could de-seed a pound of cotton a day. After the introduction of the gin, you could have one slave or otherwise paid person. If that was the case, although it rarely was in that industry, they could do 50 pounds a day. Now, if you think about those sectors of the economy where there are very few improvements that can be made in terms of productivity, one is education. It's still, pretty much straightforward. You got a person, they're in a classroom, they got a set number of kids. You can maybe tinker around with adding, two or three more, maybe even 10 more,
Mm,
but you're not going to radically increase productivity. Same thing in health. So I don't want to say that the entire increased cost in these two sectors comes from the Baumol effect, but does part of it? You're damn right it does. So what we have to understand is, and this is a
right.
very hard argument to sell to politicians, is that sorry, guys and gals, but costs for education, costs for health are always going to go up above the rate of inflation. That doesn't mean that they can just be limitless, of course, but you're getting labor savings and cost savings in other parts of the economy. Prices go down in other areas, such as flat screen televisions,
Hmm.
computers, etc. So there are several parts of the economy where you're actually paying a little less than you used to on an inflation adjusted basis. So it kind of averages out. So it's a tough argument to sell because you have to explain the damn Pomal effect to them, and it's not something that politicians are generally very interested in getting a lecture on.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly true. I mean, I mean, you hear, the one of the common bogeymen for rising healthcare costs is, um, malpractice suits, right?
Yeah.
Lawyers will sue us if we don't provide every single ounce of care that's feasible and known to man, right? And it's like, and so they've done things like capping the amount of damages you can get for a an injury caused by medical malpractice, and it's like, okay, so they can do you millions and millions of dollars worth of damage that'll cost you like care to recover for the rest of your life, and you only get 5% of it paid for by a legal judgment, and that hasn't like suddenly made healthcare like much more affordable, right? I mean that's clearly not the main driver of this whole thing.
No, 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 no. And in fact, we also need to think about it in terms of those legal judgments and awards that they have the effect of making the system a bit more safe. It serves as a disincentive to
Hmm.
reckless behavior. So, I mean, we need to do cost benefit analyses when determining what are acceptable, levels of compensation for people who are damaged by sloppy work. But putting caps on them is a very rough kind of Civil War surgery method of the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that's clearly true. I might be a little bit sensitive just as a lawyer that
I
my
know your
profession's
profession.
getting blamed here for like, the reason I can't get my kidneys, replaced is because the damn lawyers are going to raise the costs for me. It's like, yeah, well, if they screw it up, we'll raise the cost for them and give it to you. But I don't see that as like your problem right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
And I guess one of the concerns that I have is just because we have a population that is, again, I think not very reflective and very volatile, and they're under a lot of stress. And so it would be difficult to envision how they would engage serious policy debates regarding how much care they should get. I mean, so in a national system, you do ration care. You ration care in our system too, in our private insurance system. But you know, people are not always going to get what they need when they want it. I mean, you are going to make decisions based on data, and
What's
the
available,
system will
what's
determine when
efficient?
you
Yeah,
need
yeah,
care and when you don't.
yeah,
And
yeah.
And so you would have to live with that. It
Yeah,
would
yeah. I mean, there's a 0.001% that having that bunion not removed is going to cause you to go septic and die. But
yeah.
we've decided that that's an acceptable risk, and then if we decide that, then suddenly you've created a death panel.
Yeah, and we of course we have. I mean, we used to have death panels pre-ACA with 50 million people uninsured. We still have death panels in that the private insurance system is also designed to prevent delivery of
Hmm.
care. Although, as I was saying, one of the reasons why our system is so expensive is because it doesn't just outsource the job of preventing people from getting access, rationing care to the insurance companies. What ends up happening is that you end up creating all these new bureaucracies that develop to, handle things like dispute resolution, and then you get, lots of people that form a lobby that protect that, and then of course, as I was saying before, with Apex and that
Yeah,
system of making drugs more affordable for
Y-
some, it
yeah.
then gets incentivized just to write more prescriptions because that's how they're being compensated by the
You,
number of prescriptions that they
you
write. So, once you have these bad incentives in place, it can really, really balloon costs, as we've seen in our system.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we're kind of getting to is we have this system that's sort of sticky in sort of producing like all of these extra sort of side industries where everyone gets a piece of payment, right? And so we have
Yeah.
more and more of the population that is involved in things that function in a way to make things work, but are not directly providing the needed service. They're all sort of like this like superstructure that's all built on top of it.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm thinking of the discussions we've had on this program with regard to, the relative inefficiency of the U.S. defense procurement process, right?
Oh, goodness.
Yes.
And comparisons of like the Russian economy. Well, the Russian economy may not be as large as ours, but a lot more of it is devoted to actually making things, and a lot less of it is devoted to shuffling papers around. So it's actually larger in real life than it appears on paper compared to the United States, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
China
And
does a lot of stuff. We do a lot of like talking about stuff.
yeah, and again, with our incentive structure, since you've mentioned Russia and their military and their ability to both produce and procure weapons, I mean, what we've discovered is that they were able to take a model which was designed during the Soviet period to survive
Hmm.
World War III, which made their Soviet economy in many ways inefficient in terms of spreading production all over the place to
Right.
survive a major attack. But in the instance of this war, which they've been fighting now, it's been a model which has served them very well, both in terms of protecting those production facilities because they're in all these far-flung locations, so they're not easily hit by drones.
And if you
And
don't
then not
have
only
just
that, but just as
one,
you were saying, with our procurement system in the United States, I mean, we develop these really expensive weapon systems that have far more bells and whistles than are actually needed to do the job of killing. So, I mean, I would prefer to see
when
a
your
lot
F
less spent.
35 can barely get off the ground and can it actually do anything? Yeah, that,
And even if it can, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of discussion regarding the F-35, an incredibly expensive aircraft, and we can have a debate regarding just how effective it is. And many people have pointed out its many deficiencies. But if you're going to pay that much money for an aircraft, you're not going to be able to build that many of them.
right, right.
And so, does it do the job?
Yeah,
It's not a
yeah.
job that I want done, but
Quantity
if
has a
one,
quality of its own.
yeah, as Stalin
I
used
get
to
to
say.
quote Stalin. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, indeed. But I mean, but it's a metaphor for many parts of our economy, right? And
Right.
so I think that's why you're referencing this is very important for understanding the U.S. economy is that we've created all of these distortions and mal-incentives to,
Right.
create more than we need for some things and then much
Oh,
less of what
oh, oh,
we need
yeah.
for.
Or as the case of healthcare, create like exactly what we need, exactly when we need it, until there's an emergency, and then we are vastly undersupplied with what we need, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's this things have like sort of developed to be like hyper efficient, and like right when you need it, it's there, and we got it because we know exactly what's going to be required under ordinary circumstances. And then the moment the circumstances are not ordinary anymore, everything falls completely apart.
Yeah, that's the thing with neoliberalism is that it cut redundancies in systems to nothing for purported purposes of efficiency, and then just as you're saying, you have a crisis, and then you find yourself in big trouble. So hopefully we don't find ourselves, and we will at some point though, but
Yeah, I
with
mean,
a
it's inevitable. There'll be some
pandemic,
crisis, right?
yeah, we'll have some kind of health crisis, and we won't have I mean, we'll have all sorts of interesting, very fancy, expensive equipment, but will we have something as basic as needed number of hospital beds?
Right,
Maybe.
right. No, no, because the utilization review people, have like taken over, and they've got their office now, and that's because they can figure out how to fit 10 people into 9 available beds, and it's super efficient. But then suddenly, when you've got 100 people, it doesn't work.
Yep, no, exactly. And as I see that our time is growing short here, I guess I would like to make one more point, um, and that is that we have the worst of all situations for those who would like to see a public model for not only healthcare but for other services as well. And in the classical economic tradition, I mean, this means eliminating rent seeking and just delivering things as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Another term for it would be the Milwaukee sewer socialism model.
Hmm.
But we have created a healthcare system that is so rotten that imposes so many individual costs on people and not always with good outcomes. And it's all run by private insurance and nonprofit insurance, private equity, larded up with all of these extra costs. And what are people doing? A lot of people, they're blaming government, even
Hmm.
though the role of government in this has been
Well, yeah, I
it's
mean,
kind of been coordinating.
I,
Uh,
I'd,
uh,
I'd blame the government for stepping away and giving us this whole private system. That's a fair way to blame
oh no,
government for it.
I completely agree with you, but I'm saying they are blaming government
Hmm.
generally. They're saying, well, this shows government can't work, and this is what the Republicans always
Yeah,
wanted, right?
it's
I
it's,
And
mean,
then
it's,
they do
it's
the cuts, and then people are like, oh, yes, yes, have to do the cuts. But then they don't realize it's going to affect them
yeah.
because they're going to
yeah,
lose
so
their health
It,
care.
it's a lot like the classic meme that you see on social media all the time, where they show some decaying city and it says this is communism, and it's like they're all pictures from capitalist countries. They're all showing the private system at work, right? Go ahead and blame the public sector for the private sector's failings, and diminish
yeah,
the public sector even more, and promote the private sector even more. Because it could shuffle off the blame to someone else, right? Which is
exactly.
how so much of our political system works. I mean, there's so much we can complain about that's decaying these days.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that's the big challenge. I mean, how do we restore faith in government? I mean, I think that is, again, one of the things that, well, it's not something that I think, and the Republicans in the past 40 years have often directly stated as much that they wanted government to be less effective so that people would lose faith in it. And you do that by making cuts to it. And so,
small enough,
And they're
small enough,
succeeding right
small
now.
enough to be drowned in Grover Norquist's bathtub.
exactly. And Mr. Norquist, yep, that's what Grover said. And yeah,
Well, we have to go. This is it. We're out of time. Thank you, Jeff Summers.
Thanks a lot.
great being with you.
All right. Bye bye.